Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the wonderful Vicky Laina. We are talking about her decision to take a literal PhD journey and to become an international student and to study in the US. And all of the kind of logistical, financial, cultural ramifications of that. Vicky has some really golden information and tips to share. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Vicky.
Hello, Emma.
Oh, so lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So today we're going to be talking about you literally went on a journey with your PhD because you literally decided to go to the US to study. And we're going to talk about that in terms of the kind of the desire to do that, but also the kind of the particular logistical, practical challenges that you had to navigate. And I know you've got a load of great information to share on that. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But first of all, I'm just going to invite you to say a little bit about the kind of the bigger picture, what brought you to PhD study, and to tell us a little bit about that journey.
Gladly. So I'm going to start by saying that when I did my undergrad in math and studied, I actually had no idea what research was. I finished my bachelor's degree thinking that university professors were basically like high school teachers, only teaching more advanced mathematics, for example. So my first exposure to research was during my master's program and my thesis for that program. And I had a lot of fun with it, but I wasn't yet sure if this is a path I want to take. So I went back home to Greece. This is where I'm from. I continued teaching mathematics for a little bit. And then I was continually thinking back to my experience with my master's. And I was like, well, I actually really enjoyed working on that project. So maybe since I'm still thinking about it, this is an indication that I should dive deeper into research and explore what that might look like for me. And that's how I decided to pursue a doctorate in mathematics education and keep exploring that space.
Love that. I love that it came from a kind of a desire, something ignited in you. Yes, I want to see how that goes. I want to follow that through. So you had that sense of wanting to explore and curiosity, intellectual curiosity, which we love. We're all about here. And then you made some decisions about where you might like to go. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Just to give a bit of a more general context, I am from Greece. I did my undergrad in Greece. Then I did my master's in England. And then I moved back to Greece. At the time, Greece was not doing so well. And I tried finding a full-time job that I couldn't actually do. So my first choice at the time was to start the PhD program in Greece while I was still looking for a full-time position.
Right.
So I applied. I actually started volunteering with a professor at the university as a research assistant. Then an opportunity came up with a new project, and I applied and I got accepted into the program. And then for more than 5 months, I couldn't actually enroll in the program because there were ongoing strikes, personnel strikes at the university.
Right.
And during that time, and while I was waiting to be enrolled, my partner told me that he was invited to apply for a PhD in the US because he has been collaborating with a professor there and his advisor in Greece. And at first we were like, well, okay, I'm already admitted. I'm going to start here. you can move there, and if it works out, once I have all my data collected and everything, and I don't need to be at the specific place to write, maybe I will move over with you. But then I couldn't start the program, and the months went by, and eventually I was like, well, I haven't started. I might as well start applying to the US as well. It doesn't look like I know when I might start here.
Right. Well, I love that. And what a story about how PhD study and the rest of our lives really intermingle. There's a real sense of the life decisions sometimes are the ones that take us forward. Okay, so then what happens? Tell us the next bit of the story.
Yes. So if you cannot tell already, but what I have shared about my background, I did not really know people who had done a PhD before besides my university professors. So I didn't really have anyone to guide me through the process of applying. I only knew about the most, popular universities in the US. And so those were the places I started sending applications to. Like I knew about Harvard, for example, and I knew about Stanford. So I was like, okay, these are the universities I know of.
Love it.
Let's see if it works.
Love it.
So I started sending applications. I also was talking to some of my friends at the time who mentioned 2 or 3 more universities they were aware of, including Tufts University or UPenn. And I searched their programs. I found some opportunities with faculty that I could potentially work with. And I decided to send applications to these universities as well. I ended up sending, I think, 7 applications.
Right. And then?
Yes. And then I was blissfully unaware of what I didn't know.
Yeah.
But
I love it.
I was actually invited to interview for 3 of the 4 universities I applied to, and got accepted into 2 of the programs. One of them was at Tufts University, which is where I ended up starting.
Yes.
And the other one was at Teachers College.
And so what made you choose Tufts?
Yes, it wasn't that hard of a decision, to be honest. The interview I had with my advisor at Tufts was lovely. I really enjoyed talking with her, and it looked like it was going to be a really nice relationship moving forward. So that played a big role. And of course, the deciding factor was actually opportunity for funding. During the whole process of applying and connecting with other applicants, one of them in one of our conversations had said that, it's a PhD. I wouldn't do a PhD unless I was paid for it. It's actual work. So you really shouldn't do a PhD unless you're paid for it.
Right.
And one offer had funding attached to it. The other offer didn't. And the person with the funding would also way more friendly and approachable. So I went with TAP.
Okay, so it kind of made sense. And as we'd say, a little bit of a no-brainer. But I think before we move on to finances, because that will be, I know people will be interested to know a bit more about that. The sense of, you were saying, not knowing about that application process and how that is there anything you particularly, just if people were thinking of doing, applying to the US, anything particular that you'd encourage people to think about in that application process?
Yes, I think it's really important to have a sense of what you would like to study. even if it's not formulated, just have a general sense of the area that you're interested in exploring more. And then go to the websites of the universities you're considering, look at faculty, look at their more recent publications or projects that they might have running, and reach out to them. Sometimes people are too busy and they might not respond, but other times they will actually respond to you, and making that first contact, sharing your ideas, listening to their ideas and exploring whether that might be a good match is really important, not only for you as an applicant to have a sense of what the space is that you might find yourself in the future if you decide to apply, but also for the potential advisor you're reaching out to get a better sense of whether they can actually support you. Sometimes people change their focus in their research, and that is okay, and might not yet be reflected on what is on their website. So it's important to know that there is potentially a good match between you two.
Yes. And I think we talk about this a lot on the podcast. This relationship, this working relationship, which you have with your supervisory team, is so important. And I think to remember that you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. I think this is really, really important. Brilliant. So now then back to finances, which is so important. So it's really fundamental.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you were offered some funding with that, but I know you've got some other ideas in terms of funding and how you can support yourself financially. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Typically, PhD programs in the US are structured a little bit differently in the sense that they have a heavy course taking component, I guess, at the beginning. So you take courses as if you are in a master's program, and then you transition to the actual research part. And depending on your field, that sometimes comes with opportunities to be a teaching assistant, either in your program or adjacent programs. So there are usually opportunities for teaching assistantships that can cover usually most of your tuition and health insurance fees, because these are also on top of everything else, and offer you a small monthly stipend that can go toward life expenses.
Yes, yes.
There are limited research assistantships, and depending again on the field of study, this can be very limited, whereas like somewhat limited. And these are usually coordinated directly with your advisor, because the funding comes from individual projects most often. And so they would be the best to know if such opportunities might be available. The other thing that is really important to remember is that if you go to the US as an international student, like I was, there is additional tuition you need to pay. And those assistantships, either teaching or research, do not typically cover that additional tuition, which is a considerable amount.
Yes.
Sometimes, if you work as a research assistant, your advisor might have been proactive, or your PI might have been proactive in their budget, and they might be able to cover the additional tuition. Teaching assistantships almost never cover that part. So this is something to keep in mind, plan ahead if possible, or know that you might need to apply for additional funding that could cover those expenses.
Yes, yes. And I know it's not only financially that it's trickier as an international student. I know, could you talk to us a little bit about kind of visas and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's usually like the opportunities for external fellowships are fewer for international students. Sometimes your home country might be offering some fellowships for you to study abroad, and those might actually be your best bet to cover the additional expenses. Scholarships that are offered within the US and that are open to international students are usually highly competitive and really hard to get, even with multiple attempts. There is also there are restrictions on the work you can do as an international student. You can only work for the university and for certain hours every semester. You can work more hours over the summer, but it needs to be, again, part of the university system. Securing internships is more tricky, I guess. So that is also something to keep in mind.
So there's a lot of additional paperwork. If there wasn't enough paperwork on the PhD, there's a lot of additional paperwork. But presumably there are real benefits. And what did you experience as the benefits of this? As well, you know, being with your partner, obviously, but
well, funny enough, we didn't end up in the same city.
Right. Right.
And for the first 2 years, we were in the same state in the US. But then my advisor moved to another university, and I really loved working with her. So I decided to follow her and apply to a second university and start over. So then we found ourselves on different states, one on the East Coast and the other one on the West Coast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that, you know, we're still in the same country, but
right.
not that close. But there were things I really, really enjoyed. I found it much easier actually to create communities amongst other students in the places I ended up studying. These were mostly communities between international students in those spaces, so not necessarily many who were US citizens or permanent residents in the US. Although I will say that 3 of my closest friends in this journey were actually from the US. So it varies, but in general, my big takeaway is that I had opportunities to be part of communities that felt really supportive, even if that support was, you know, struggling together, like not feeling alone in this process.
Right. Because I think being an international student kind of puts you out there straight away, doesn't it? And I think that there is a different experience that can happen and can come from that in terms of, as you say, making connections, being open to support. And I am so pleased that you found your squad. That sounds very, very good.
Yeah, there's one more thing that I would like to point out, as because I think it's actually quite important. When I first started my program there, it was very strange to me because of the structure of taking classes at the beginning. I was coming into the program thinking that I am actually ready to do a research project, having had the educational experiences I've had in Europe. And so having to take classes and not being able to work on a research proposal, for example, for the first 2 years, felt frustrating to me at the beginning.
Right.
And also a lot of the ways in which instruction was happening in those classes felt foreign to me. It was much more collaborative. We were being asked to talk to each other all the time, to think on the spot a lot, to work on like short presentations in class and present during the class. And for me, all of that was uncomfortable at the beginning.
Right.
I had never been taught in that way before, and I felt that I was never offered enough time to actually think through the topic and be able to come up with something that was worth sharing.
Okay.
I'm going to say all these years and training later, I actually really appreciate that opportunity that was there for me at the beginning, because even though it made me very uncomfortable at first, I think it's one of the things that really supported me later on to not be afraid to reach out and talk to people and share ideas that were still underdeveloped. And just, I was just thinking through them, and I felt comfortable, being in a place and just saying, well, this is what I've thought so far. Can we talk about it? And maybe you can help me make progress with it.
Oh, I love that. I love that in terms of this true sense of conference and this sense of collaboration. Brilliant. But as you say, quite a different way of learning. And I think being aware, because even going from department to department can be very different, but going into a whole new educational system can be real culture shock, really can. I'm aware of time, Vicky. And I know we've touched on such good stuff here in terms of that application process, in terms of finances, in terms of cultural differences and what that might mean. I wonder, out of all of that, whether there's a top tip that you could share, or top tips indeed, for people to take away with them.
Yes. I think really a PhD is a journey, and it's very much a learning journey. So my pro tip would be that wherever you find yourself, and especially if you find yourself in a foreign country, be aware and keep in mind differences in culture and norms of communication, whether that's everyday culture or academic culture. Because allowing yourself to recognize those differences and reflect on them not only helps you navigate that space a bit more productively, I would say, but it also makes you as a researcher much stronger in your skills to, really identify what is going on and how this might be affecting you or others in the future.
Oh, that's gorgeous. And this sense of the kind of the meta journey that's going on around and within your studies. Vicky, thank you so much for this. I know that you're still traveling. You're still on journeys. You're in Austria now, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I am currently on my fifth, if I haven't lost count, country of residing, studying, and working.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, often people talk about the PhD as a passport to literally be able to travel, and it is fantastic. The scholarly community is a global one, and there definitely is opportunity to travel with that, and you are testament to that. Thank you very much for being with us here and for sharing some of those experiences.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was lovely.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening.